everyone, and welcome to Let's Get Something Straight. I'm Courtney Kubitza with Stahls TV, and today I'm excited to share some tips with you guys to get things straight. When it comes to designs and laying different logos out onto apparel, even a really great design can look bad if the placement is in the wrong spot. So I know we've all experienced the not only crooked designs, but the belly design or the left chest that angles somewhere in this area, and it can really ruin shirts and drive your cost up, and it just makes, and sometimes we as decorators start to really overanalyze how straight is something, and it starts to take in our time. And so we want to give you guys some tips to quickly line up graphics, how to do them so they're straight, and also just the placement tips for different types of garments, from t-shirts to polo shirts, as well as button-ups and football jerseys and things like that. So I'm excited to dive on into that kind of content. To start, we're going to be using a couple of accessories. So depending on what you have available at your shop, you're going to see a couple of things. Some rulers. I'm sure all of you have these hanging around and are probably using them today to help get things straight. So we'll show some tips on how to use these. Also, we'll be using things like our laser alignment system. So Stahls now sells a laser alignment system. We'll talk about really when it's really beneficial to use something like this, when you should be using it, and how it speeds up your productivity. So we'll show that process as well for different designs. And then we're also going to look at a couple of different layout guides and how we can leverage them just to speed up the process of layout, making sure letters, numbers, and designs and everything are straight onto our garments. So the first thing I think, and the first step into getting things straight, is going to be putting them straight on the platen themselves, because no matter what tool you're using, whether you're 3 inches down from the top of your platen or not, for even center designs, if the garment itself isn't straight on the bottom platen, it doesn't really matter what measurements you're taking. So we'll talk about a couple of tips for that to get started. I'm going to load on my t-shirt here. It's just a regular 100% cotton t-shirt onto my platen. And so when I load garments onto the platen, one thing I always do is I make sure to pull them down to where a lot of the garment is being worn almost by the bottom platen. So I'm pulling it taut with my platen, and I'll switch to another camera so you guys can see this a little bit closer. This is one of the really big benefits of threadability if you have a heat press like the Fusion that I'm using here, or if you have a Hotronix clamp style press or a max press that allows you to add a stand to make it threadable, because it's much easier for me to find the center of my design and load this on straight if I'm going to pull it taut with the platen and splitting it open this way. If not, I've got to kind of shake it out and lay it up onto the platen in the other direction. And usually what I'll do when I do this scenario to make sure it's center onto the platen is I make sure the neckline is center with the bottom platen. I adjust the sides to see I have the same amount of material on both sides, which for me is about 2 inches on each side, and this looks even. If not, I can adjust. And then I slowly pull this back until the collar is off. Now that is going to give me kind of my center point in making sure my shirt is center on the platen. If I'm doing the threadable method, easier for me to just thread this open, split this on, making sure again the collar and the tag are center with my platen. I'll pull this taut to where the shoulders are at the corner of the bottom platen. I've got my garment loaded on here straight, and then I can make my decisions on where to put the graphics and making sure they're straight as well. Again, I'm just loading it, making sure the sides are the same, and that'll help to get the garment straight. Let's talk about some things to get the garment center. So, and how to center your graphics with the center of the garment. So one thing that a lot of decorators have done for a number of years, and I recommend doing, is always folding your inventory when it comes in if it's not already creased, in a way that it's folded on the shelf and going to give you that crease. Because this garment, this is actually how we have stored these in our office, already had the crease that I wanted on the center of this. So I knew exactly where the center of my shirt was, and I could easily center my transfer up with that. If you don't have that crease and it's not prominent enough even from you storing it, you can quickly fold the garment, load it onto the heat press, and just kind of iron it out a little bit just to help you get that crease to be a little bit more prominent. Then you can find the center line, which you'll iron out whenever you do your application. So now I've got a nice crease mark on the center. I'm going to load that garment back on, and then we can line up our transfers with the center of the shirt. Estimating to make sure I have the same amount of material on the sides. You could also use your ruler for this as well to make sure you're exactly 1 inch or 2 inches in between the two. And then we're going to line our graphics up. So my first graphic is actually going to be a screen printed transfer from Transfer Express. The nice thing about screen printed transfers from Transfer Express is they have a grid line on the back. So it helps give me almost a cheating line. So I know if I'm going to have a straight line just by using a ruler or a laser alignment system to help make sure it's straight. So I'm going to show the ruler method for this on the back. Again, I'm just going to line my transfer paper up onto the Platen. I'll switch over so you guys can see this on my overhead camera. There it goes. All right. So I've got my Platen, or my garment loaded on straight. I've got this kind of centered up. I want to make sure the center of my transfer paper, which is actually this line here, is centered with that center line I had creased into my garment. And then I'm just going to double check. So when you're doing a center design, you're usually about 3 inches down from the transfer. So my transfer starts in this line. I'm just going to lay my ruler onto the line. Looks like I'm at about 2.5 inches, so I want to go down just a little bit more. And then I'll just double check these two sides with the ruler, lining it up straight with both the horizontal and the vertical lines. I'm about 3 inches there. And again, I'm going to do it on this side just to make sure everything looks even. There we go. And I'm 3 inches. So I'm going completely straight. This ruler I like because I can actually, it's about 2 inches, so I could even lay this out and know I'm getting a nice straight print in with the collar to help line everything up. I'm going to apply this down at 340 degrees for just 8 to 10 seconds, just so we can see what the application would look like. Make sure everything's straight like I told you it would be. And peel this back, and I've got a completed design. So keep in mind, if you're creating graphics, kind of like what I have here, and there are you're gang designing, which is a huge benefit of screen printed transfers, you can actually trim these apart, which cuts your costs. But remember, if you're trimming these, you're going to want to use a paper cutter or make sure your line is straight because you're using the grids on this paper. So of course, if I'm cutting it like this, I'm going to have a diagonal line and nothing to go off of. So you definitely use these grids on the transfer paper. So I've got my design completely printed out here, ready to go, nice and straight, again about 3 inches down. I did choose to use the rulers, but another quick method that a lot of people will use for placement is just using something you always have on you, which is your hands for a guide. So that gives me something to do with a ruler with the front, but of course if I'm doing a large job, I may want a little bit more accuracy with using a laser alignment system. So I'm just going to thread this shirt on through the back and do a back print with the laser alignment system. To get started with a laser alignment system, again, I really recommend this whenever you're doing a large number of jobs. So if you're going to be printing, let's say, 50 or 100 shirts with the same logo in the exact same position, you can gain a lot of efficiency from using a layout guide like you see here. So I'll go ahead and switch the lights off so you guys can see my lasers as I begin to turn them on a little bit, so it may get a little dark on screen, but I want you to see how the lasers work and how we can adjust them. So I start by lining up my grid, which this laser alignment wizard actually comes with the laser alignment system. So if you decide to purchase one of these, they're really great when you have a lot of different people that are printing the same spot in the same shirt, because your 4 inches over may be different from somebody else's, and you're guaranteeing to get that same straight line and position every time very quickly. So I've got my wizard laying here. The laser alignment system has 4 lines. So I'm going to just quickly turn them on so you can kind of see where they're at. Depending on what my design is, so that top front design that I just done on the t-shirt, I could have shot this design right across here, which is the perfect position 3 inches down from the top of my Platen for a front center design. The back center design is actually going to be number 3, so I need to adjust, I believe it's this one, I need to adjust this to become my number 3 design. So all I've done here is just undid the laser, twisted it, and then it's now laying in the correct position. I don't need number 2, so if I want to turn that off and only have the lasers that I need on, I can do that. I'm actually going to turn off the angled one as well. They say third time's the charm. I'm going to turn off the angled one too, so you guys can kind of see the laser grid. So I've got my placement 4 inches down, which is ideal for a back print. And then the next thing I want to make sure to do is get that center line. So I'm just going to adjust my last laser here, put it in line with this grid. And this is for simplicity. It kind of has the basics, your top back, your top front, your center, and your left chest. We'll also look a little bit later about how we can leverage these types of laser tools for lining up graphics that maybe you only need 2 inches down on a ladies cut shirt. So once I have this in place, of course you want to make sure not to heat press over this guide, it will melt. So I want to remove that from my heat press. I'm going to load the back of my t-shirt on. And now, going with the same principles that you saw from the beginning, all I want to do is I want to pull this to where the tag, assuming the tag is the center of the shirt, which is a good rule of thumb. Of course, the tag is not always the center, but that's usually what everybody goes off of. That's what they always say about shoulders as well. Shoulders, of course, I've seen some shirts that are made that aren't exactly where the shoulders are perfect position for lining things up, but that's kind of what everybody goes off of, since the shoulders of the shirt are what's going to sit on the person. So again, I'm pulling that taut as if a person's wearing this onto my heat press, double checking to make sure I have the right amount of material on each side. Line that up, which actually lines up perfectly with the center line that I had from my front press whenever I had created that crease. Now all I need to do is every press, I never need to use a ruler or second guess. I can just line up my design at 4 inches down and press it for the recommended application. So what I'm gaining here is I'm going to gain a lot of speed in this. So while this application is going on, Karen, do I have any questions?
We do. Is there an easy way to adjust the lasers? Somebody said when they adjust theirs, it moves all over. When they get it to where they want it and tighten it, it moves.
I'll switch back to the main camera so you guys can see me doing it, but the laser alignment systems to date have been created with a new laser tool that makes it pretty easy. So I'm just actually adjusting it here. Actually, let me turn them all on here. I'm just undoing the screw knob here, and then I can adjust and move them as much as I need to. So really, it's really just more of a simple hand and just kind of getting it to where you're slowly rotating the laser to get it to in place of where you need it to be. Any other questions?
If you don't have a swing away heat press, how do the laser adjustments work?
So that's a good question. So I actually have this next to my swing away press just set up on a table, so I recommend taking the laser alignment system and just dedicating some type of table to it next to your press, or you can sit on the table next to your press. Just be aware, one thing, the base of this is very, very heavy, so it's going to hold down, but I would caution if you have an auto open press and you're laying it on the same table, maybe a 6-foot table, and you're laying it onto the side of it, it'll lay right next to it and easily shoot the lines across, but I would usually tape it down with some type of industrial tape so that it definitely won't move every time that you're getting that pop from your auto open press. Any other questions? All right, awesome. So if you guys have questions, shoot them out as I'm going through this. But you can see the laser alignment tool really does gain some speed and efficiency. So, of course, you're not going to want to adjust the lines and make sure they're straight and go through the process of taking your layout guide and laying it out for every single job, especially if you're moving from smalls to large to extra larges, which we all know changes the amount of material and the amount of design you have for getting things straight. So with that, I would definitely recommend doing it for maybe a larger job, 50, 100 pieces, and really gaining efficiency as you get into those orders. All right, so I'm going to take this off here, and I'm going to load onto our next garment. So far we've done a lot of placement with items on t-shirts, which of course is a lot of your job, but I know that left chest logos is usually a huge challenge for decorators with lining up things straight in the correct position, and just getting some tips for when you're using these types of items and how to press them accurately. So I made a joke earlier in the session where I talked about the under the armpit logo, which is where a lot of left chest graphics end up being. We know the principle that I've heard for quite a number of years was you take the center of the shirt, you take the sleeve or the underarm, and you go somewhere in the middle. So if I've got 6 inches to play with, I'm going straight down into the middle of my shirt, but that varies. So and then I've heard the second principle, which of course I'm going to use in this session, which is take your center line of your shirt and go 3 inches over from it. So that's another principle for creating your left chest graphics as well. Of course, keep in mind that I'm doing this on an adult large button-up shirt, but if you're doing a ladies cut shirt that's maybe a small, it's going to be more like 1.5 inches. So you want to use those measurements and you'll need to adjust them accordingly. But for getting things straight, all of these principles will apply. I'm actually going to be using a heat printing pillow and a couple of accessories because I have plastic buttons on this large button-down shirt. And so you guys can see as I'm lining up the graphics and some things that I'm doing here, I am just going to actually use a heat printing pillow, which is just going to allow me to line everything up straight. But if you have a heat press like the Fusion or a heat press that allows you to do interchangeable Platens, I highly recommend for getting things in the correct position. The 6x10 Platen is really helpful in only isolating the left chest part of that shirt. Also helps to get the buttons off as well, so keep that in mind. All right, I'll head back over to my overhead camera so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to turn off my lasers real quick just so I can give another idea. Of course, you guys will be able to see that the lasers can also shoot straight lines, which we'll show you here shortly, into the correct position. Now that I've gotten my shirt on, again, I did the same principle. So I've loaded a full 16x20 pillow in. There are different sizes that are available, but if you're using this method, I find the 16x20 to be the easiest because I can size it up perfectly with my bottom platen and make sure my garment is then, again, taut with the pillow so that it's hanging correctly and all of the right places. So once I have that button-up shirt straight, I need to go about 4 inches down and 3 inches over for my left chest graphic. I'm going to use 2 different rulers. If you have a T-square, that's another great tool that you can use for lining up things straight because you're able to kind of create a T and make sure the top of the ruler is straight. I didn't have one here at the office today, so I'm going to use this method. So again, I'm going to go about 3 inches over from my design, and I'm going to go about 4 inches down. And that's going to give me my starting point for the graphic. Another trick that I've used for a long time with button-up shirts is being able to leverage what you have on there for creating your straight line. So for me, that could be the button. The buttons, again, using them as my point to get started. I know this button, if I place this ruler, gives me about 3 inches down. So using this as your straight arrow, as well as the seam on your shirt, so lining that up straight, and then going about 3 inches over to create your graphic in the correct position. So that's one way to do it. Of course, the laser alignment tool will help as well. So I'm just going to lay that laser grid back up here and adjust my lasers to get to the correct position for my left chest. And if you're doing a lot of button-up shirts for maybe a company or a corporate client, this may be a great tool to invest in for your left chest because I like to actually take the 4 lasers and create a box by turning them all on, and I can do that with this system. So I'm actually going to adjust. I'm going to leave my top one here. There we go. I'm going to start moving my other lasers. Number 4 that you're seeing on this laser wizard is actually what they consider the left chest center. So the center of your left chest design should hit up with this line. But I'll show you a trick for if you have oversized designs or even a large back design that you want to make sure the center of your transfer is hitting these center lines. Again, if I want to, I can adjust any of these to give me a box. So I always like to tell customers, you'll notice on the right-hand side here, you're seeing a ruler as well as on the bottom. So I'm actually seeing a ruler grid that if I want to make sure my graphic always fits within this 3-inch box, I can take this line and shoot it down from the 3-inch to the 6, which creates my bottom line. There we go. And then I can take my last one, and I could always create an extra line over to make sure that the graphic falls into that same position. So you can kind of see how you're getting an idea of a square. So it always drops down in there. So those are some ideas that you can have as you start to make sure the placement always falls into that exact same box every time. I'm going to turn off the ones I don't need since I'm just going to do a quick center placement right here using my center line and my left chest, which are really the only 2 I need. Remove my grid, and then again, I can line up my graphic. So I'm going to take the center of this graphic, fold it in half. This is a pretty small graphic. It's only about 4 inches. But again, you're going to try to find the center of it to make sure, for sure. Center my graphic, lining up with the center line. I always like the cad-cut materials like I'm using here, which is just cad-cut fashion film, because the clear carrier allows me to see the lettering so I know that everything's lining up straight on there. I'm going to actually cover this, if I can find my cover sheet. I've got a little mess going on here. All right, with a flexible application pad. The reason being is this is actually going to help to protect my plastic buttons that I have that come out under the high heat of the heat press. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that over top of there. You may have seen these flexible application pads used for other items that are synthetic, like performance wear, leather, nylon, things you're worried about scorching, like plastic, under the heat press. So I'm going to apply this for actually a full 30 seconds to make sure enough heat goes through. If you ever apply these types of garments with a flexible application, just make sure you're doubling the time and leaving the heat as necessary. And I'm going to adjust my pressure a little bit for my pillow. All right, so we got 30 seconds. What questions do we have?
Could you give the viewers some advice on tables or stands for the heat press and the alignment tool, and also what to do if you don't have a threadable heat press? Does the alignment tool still work the same way?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Two really good questions, I guess. So to start, any table will really work. I would like to recommend, if you have a table setting like this, like maybe the scissor cart or a cart that's small and narrow that your heat press sets on, just getting a sturdy stand to sit next to it. And you can purchase those anywhere because the laser alignment tool is very lightweight, even though the base is a little bit more dense to hold it down in place. Aside from that, if you're using a 6-foot table, which I know a lot of decorators with auto clamps will usually use a large table, lay the heat press on one side and kind of lay out their garments on the other side and everything there, you can easily slide the heat press over into the center and just lay that laser tool next to it. So it lines up perfectly. We actually use it a lot at our office on the auto clam. It just depends on your preference. And then the last question was, I'm sorry, can I refresh my memory? Yes, for non-threadable heat presses, yes, the laser alignment tool works the exact same way. As I kind of shown in the beginning, the way that I would do it is the grid, and I'll switch back so you guys can kind of see the grid a little bit better here on top of the heat press. But the grid, you can actually see where it says your tag here. I'm laying it out this way because this is the way my shirt's thread on. So this is the collar or the neck of my shirt. If you were using your heat press the other direction, it would easily just drop right down in there behind your heat press. And again, you would just shoot the lasers and adjust them so that they're going up at this angle for the center of your shirt. So I would just load my shirt on, peel this so we can get this off as a completed design there. And then I would just load on my t-shirt the same way we saw in the beginning. Where I'm making sure it's center and then using this center line here as my center point, just like I did in the reverse screen print method. Any other questions?
Yes. We have, what are the rules for different sizes of shirts for left chest logos? They'll all be different, but not really sure what inches to do.
Yeah, so for left chest logos, a standard I've always used is 3 inches for a large men's shirt, 4 inches for maybe an extra large or larger. When you really need to go smaller is usually ladies cut shirts. So this style of garment where you're looking for the logo, this one's only over about 1.5 inches. So that's more of a standard for ladies garments, smalls and mediums. You're more about 1.5 inches to 2 inches over versus the 3 to 4 inches for a large adult. Okay. Great questions. Keep them coming. So as you guys can see, we do have the completed garment here, no melted buttons, using those couple accessories, and then a nice straight design. I used to crack a big joke when I started at Stahls years ago, pressing onto designs and doing videos where I would actually hold the garment up and I would say, see, everything looks straight, but of course we can't do that with our customers. So you want to make sure to use these principles and to apply them not only for you, but anybody who's operating your heat presses and decorating with the designs. Okay, so I have 2 more designs to show you. The next one is pretty interesting, and what I imagine a lot of you do, and those are team uniforms. Team uniforms are a godsend almost in the way that they're created, and we're very lucky that they have the hemlines that they do. I feel like that's the best thing they ever put onto a football jersey is the hemline that you have on the back. It's not always straight, it's not always perfect, but it's giving you a perfect line to go off of to make sure your names and numbers are always straight onto your jersey. Now I am just going to thread this on the fusion here just to split the 2 layers for the mesh football jersey. Load that on into place. And then, like I said, if I want to, I can always create my center line, but I'm following the same principles for this football jersey that I did with the t-shirt. So using the tag as my center line, making sure that's center with the heat press, pulling it taut, and the way that it would lay onto a customer's shoulders, and making sure I have the same amount of material on each side. One other thing I want to mention very quickly is that you'll notice there's a lot of interchangeable platens for heat presses. Sometimes that makes it easier to line up a graphic on a smaller garment, because with this large garment fits absolutely perfect on a 16 by 20 platen. So I know it's straight because I can see on the two sides I've got seams here, I've got it center, and so I've got it perfectly centered with the platen. A lot of the times with ladies' garments you get that same benefit with a smaller platen like an 11 by 15, where you thread it on, it fits snug and perfect, and you know that it's center on that platen. So keep those in mind when you're looking at why you use your accessories that you have maybe laying around your shop. Switch over to the overhead camera so you guys can see real quick. Well, actually, I'm going to switch back to my table over here and just show you a quick tool. So for names and numbers, I could do a couple of things. You can pre-cut them yourselves on your vinyl cutter. So this here would be a good example of one that you custom cut. That's easy to align because if I switch to this camera, you can see I can use this hemline, and I'll turn these off so they're not distracting us, but you can see this hemline here is going to make a perfect straight line for me to just make sure I am exactly where I need to be from that hemline. So if I'm going 3 inches down from the back, if I want to be maybe an inch from the bottom, I can lay out my graphic and then just use my ruler to make sure 1 inch, still 1 inch. So I would know that I have a straight design there before pressing. So the cad-cut names, luckily, are all cut in a straight line, so you know that if you weeded them off like all cad-cut materials, that line's straight, this is straight, I've got a straight design, easily able to line up. Same thing with my numbers, so I can lay out pre-cut numbers, or I could have them pre-spaced, and I would do the same principle. So once I have my name there, I can just double check, and I usually double check the two sides using the name as my placement. So for this, I know I've got the right, I've got about 3 inches there between the total, and I know I have 3 inches in between here. So I know it's lining up straight. I can adjust using this ruler to make sure the difference. Depending on the jersey, the gap space could be anywhere between 1 inch to 3 inches between your name and your number. And so there's different ways to learn that just by looking at Stahls.com and the type of jersey, whether it's a youth or an adult, for you to heat apply. Cover this real quick with a cover sheet so I can apply. And then we'll look at some principles for when you're doing names and numbers with pre-cut letters, which can be a little bit more difficult to get into a straight line. Adjust my pressure before I do this application. Pull this back, and I did use the cover sheet for sure on this one because these pre-cut numbers, if you've never used them, don't have a carrier overlining them, so they could actually stick to just about anything, including the heat press, and then you've got to clean it off. It's a good mess. So I did use that, but now you can see the straight lines. I can peel this back here that we were able to create. Now, as I had mentioned, pre-cut letters and numbers are a little bit different. So you get over to your heat press with a bunch of pre-cut numbers, which look letters, which look exactly like the numbers, and so you guys can see them. If I was trying to line these up in a straight line, it gets to be a little bit more difficult to do this with just the human eye because there's so many variables to getting this straight. This one looks straight to me, so I've got those two together. I'm trying to add this one. Is that the same amount of, and then there's questions like, is that the same amount of gap space? Yeah, okay, that looks right. That looks good. There's a lot of time in this, which is why so many years people have cut their own names, but sometimes there's a cost benefit, or you just don't have a cutter to create your own name because you want to have the letters on hand. So we'll look at a tool called a layout guide over here at my table. It's actually going to show me how to line these up in a straight way that make them look like a cad-cut design. Makes it much easier for lining them up straight onto the jersey. We'll go over to the table here so you guys can see. Don't mind my mess. But the grid that you're seeing here is actually called the Stahls layout guide, designed here for pre-cut letters and numbers. So it can be repositioned and laid flat onto any table. As you'll see, it has rulers here at the bottom so you know how far your spacing is for your designs. It gets further into detail, so if you're not just worried about spacing it straight and you want to make sure it's also at the correct angle for a certain arch, on a diagonal or an angle for a split front, it allows you to lay out pre-cut letters and numbers in this way so that you're sure that they're straight every time. And the same principle even applies. The jersey I pressed had one letter or had one number. But even if you have two numbers, you may want to make sure that the bottoms of the numbers are lining up straight. And that's why a lot of this is helpful, but particularly I like the lettering. So now that I have that laid flat, and you can reposition this on any table, I'm just going to use my straight ruler line here at the bottom to line up my letters very quickly, making sure they're all on the right side. And if I want this to be a half an inch in between, or if I want this to be an inch in between, I can adjust that. And so this is not only making sure that the letters are straight for the on the garment, but making sure they're straight when they get over there and laying them out. So it's much quicker, easier way. I can ensure the spacing is the same using my ruler here at the bottom. And then I'm just going to take a quick mask. So if you remember on that cad-cut version, I had a mask that I could use. I can now take that, line that up over my letters, and then I'm going to be stingy and save a little bit of my mask here. But now what that's done is that creates my letters in my straight design that I can now take over to my heat press and heat apply. So it makes it a lot simpler for now going over to this heat press and making sure I line up everything at a straight angle. So now I can take that straight line, it goes straight over there, and we're in a much better position than we once were before. So great ideas for when you're wanting to line up letters and numbers straight is to use the ruler. Always use that laser alignment tool, of course, if you have it available, but rulers as well as this lettering layout guide, all of this is available from Stahls as well. So my last one I want to go through is I want to use another t-shirt onto the lettering layout guide. So this garment particularly is a ladies cut garment, and I actually don't have a smaller platen available right now, so I'm just going to lay it out flat on my heat press. Remember, I can actually lay it, and you know what, I think I will, so we can show the laser alignment tool in a regular form rather than being in the screen printing form. So when we do graphics on the neck shirts, this is very different from the position we were in with a crew neck shirt because the neckline starts here instead of up here. So that's about 4 inches of space that's being missed. So if I put the graphic 3 inches down, I've got a center belly button design, and it's not going to fit exactly where I want it to be. So I have to keep that in mind when I'm using the lettering layout tool. So when I go to shoot this wizard and my lines down onto the platen, I'll lay that out there. I'm going to want to use these rulers here that are on the side because now 3 inches is going to get me somewhere around here. And if I started it at the bottom of the neckline and went 3 inches, I'm definitely down here in the center of my belly button. So I need to make more of a custom line, which I can do using the rulers on the side here. So I'm going to turn this lights back on, and I'm going to make some adjustments to create my line where I need it to be. And I could even use the ruler. I could bring it down a little bit. That's probably going to be where I want to be for this. Make sure I'm not going too far over. There we go. Nice straight line there. Makes it perfect. All right, 3 inches down from this position made it perfect line because I was going about an inch from the V-neck. Make sure that's tight. That one holds in place, and then I'm going to just shoot my center line using that same grid as my center position. Center line's in place, lock it in, remove my lettering layout guide, and now, once I get this laid out here, I can now line up my transfer, which for this one's a little bit larger. So remember, center line, center of the transfer, and I just usually take the material, fold it the non-adhesive side to the non-adhesive side, get a nice crease there so I know where the center is. Line that center up with the center of the design. Make sure this V-neck goes off the platen so it doesn't cause any issues with any inaccurate pressure with that getting hit first. I'll apply this for the full application. And then now I can Press, I'll do these for 10 seconds, but I can easily press these for a number of dance schools, all in that same position on that V-neck ladies cut shirt. Pull back my carrier. So switch back to my main camera, just so you guys can see me, and then go ahead and type in any questions that you guys have had that I might have missed so far.
Someone would like to know if they mess up while heat pressing, can they remove their film or no?
That's a great question. So I know that it's very rarely that a lot of you guys here watching the class mess up. But if that happens, there is a, depending on the film, usually for thicker films like thermofilm, which was on that football jersey, those specifically can be removed very easily with a lettering solvent remover or a methylene chloride. Stahls sells it. All you need to do is turn the garment on the inside, apply some of the solution to it, and then the vinyl numbers or the film numbers should come right off.
Do you need to use a cover sheet for all materials?
Cover sheet for all materials. It's such a tricky question. It's like asking, should I wear a seatbelt all the time? The answer is yes, for safety reasons and for making sure nothing sticks to your top of your heat press or ruins your garment. I would always recommend using a cover sheet when it's absolutely 100% necessary, is when a transfer is exposed. So when I applied over these pre-cut numbers that have no carrier or anything covering them, and this is actually the film and the transfer exposed to the heat press, that's when you 100% need it. But it's always good just to make sure somebody using your heat press before you, or maybe you had forgotten from a couple weeks earlier that something was stuck to the heat press. It's good just to have that cover so you don't apply it to a white shirt and have something sticking to it, ruining the garment.
Say the name of the solvent used for removing the design one more time.
Yeah, Stahls calls it the lettering solvent remover, and then it's a methylene chloride material, but if you just go to Stahls' website and search up lettering solvent remover, that'll get you it.
Question, is it better to center the design using the collar or the distance between the sleeves?
I like to assume that the collar is always center. I actually use both of them, so when I'm loading the garment on, I'm making sure the collar is center with the platen, and then also adjusting to make sure that I have the same amount of material between the sleeves and the shirt. So this allows me to make sure that collar is center onto the platen. And to make sure it's center, I'm actually eyeballing it, but you could easily somewhere use a ruler. Here we go. I could easily use a ruler to say, yeah, I'm 100% certain 4 inches and then 4 inches over. Or you can just kind of look this way, which this way I can actually see I need to go over just a little bit. So I'm using the collar as well as the sleeves for my centering.
How do you prevent scorch marks on cotton polyblend materials?
Scorch marks. So cotton poly garments, especially if they have a higher poly or a rayon content, will have a ability to scorch under a high heat. I would look for a low heat transfer just to make sure that you're not putting too much heat onto that garment, which is causing the scorching. So cad-cut Premium Plus for vinyl cutters is a great solution. Stahls Elastiprints from Transfer Express is another great solution, as well as Stahls Tech Line from Stahls.
Question, what kind of cover sheet did you use on the button-up shirt again?
That was the flexible application pad, so that was the silicone type stretchy thick cover sheet, which then protects these types of plastic.
What is the optimal placement for the laser alignment system? Do you have a recommendation for how far away it should be from the heat press?
I don't have a recommendation for that. I believe it's about 6 inches over from where we have the platen starting on the Fusion heat press. But once you lay it out, you'll be able to kind of see how the lines shoot it.
If there's a pocket on a shirt and the pocket itself is not straight or centered, is it better to level the design with the pocket?
Yes. Yep, I would always use a hemline if it's on the garment, traditionally as the placement line, because that's going to be what usually the eye catches. So it's going to notice if more if the transfer is off from the pocket rather than the pocket being off from the shirt. Now, if it's so significantly off that the pocket's kind of going down and it really looks crooked when you hold that shirt up, that's when you might want to kind of scrap or return back to the supplier, because you're probably not going to want to use that one, but I would always follow the hemline that's on there.
Can you use the laser alignment tool with left and right side swing machines?
left and right side, as far as the machine that goes both ways, you're always going to have to set the laser up into the way that the heat press isn't going to hit it. So I could never set the alignment tool up on this side because it's actually going to swing into it. There's not enough room for it to miss it, and so that way it would not work. If you have if you're interested in the dual air press, that actually goes from, it has a multiple head that moves from 2 different Platens and allows you to press with one machine 2 heat presses basically at the same time. It has the lasers built in on the machine.
One of the viewers just switched to a threadable heat press and they find it a little bit harder to make things straight because the shoulders don't always line up. How do you adjust for that?
As far as the shoulders lining up, so for me with a threadable heat press, I always pull it taut. So where the shoulders are the point that I'm using. So that's where I know the center of it is. So the shoulders of a shirt, of course, you guys know, is not going to always be a 100%. I wish they were, because that would make it a lot easier for us. But I still, again, always use it because remember, the shoulders of the person is going to, the shirt's going to lay directly on the shoulder, so that's how it's going to lie. So just pulling it taut on that threadable heat press helps me to get that. Okay, great. So some couple tips and tools to keep in mind. Obviously, rulers, keep them in hand at your heat press. I'm sure you already have them. T-squares are also a really great tool that you can pick up at any office store to help make sure you're getting that straight line down the center of your shirt and giving you a guide to work with. For your larger jobs or jobs when you definitely want 100% accuracy, which of course a lot of us, I'm sure all of us do, the laser tool does allow you to speed up the efficiency and gain a little bit more, ease there and being able to press things in a more efficient manner. So some tools to keep in mind at your heat press: a laser as well as a lettering tool, which if you're using pre-cut letters and numbers, this is a huge benefit to you in being able to lay them out very quickly and getting them to apply to the garment. So keep these tools in mind. We of course are going to share more tips for laying out designs and things like that at stahlstv.com, and we encourage you guys to join us for an upcoming class with those as well. Thanks for watching.